Hello, and welcome to In the Light, Growing Your Soul with me, Anna Isabel. And it is with great pleasure that I welcome back today my guest, who is the wonderful Steve Burgess. Hello, Steve.
Hi, Anna. Thanks for having me back on. It's great to see you again.
Well, I had to say wonderful because I always enjoy our conversations, and um, you are somebody I consider to be a colleague because we do the same things. We are hypnotherapists. We practice analytical hypnotherapy as well as past life regression.
Yeah,
So it's a real treat to have conversations with you.
thank you.
So
Except I'm not an astrologer like you are.
yeah, oh yes,
You've got that on me. I don't do that.
that's right. Um, so you have written this wonderful book called The Adventures of Hypnotherapist, which I am thoroughly enjoying, of course.
Thank you.
Um, and it is very focused specifically on past life regression therapy. Um, now, how did you get started as a past life regressionist?
Yeah, it was actually quite by accident. It was 32 years ago now. I'd been working as a hypnotherapist for about a year, doing the standard stuff that most hypnotherapists do, guiding clients into trance, using post-hypnotic suggestion therapy, visualizations, metaphors, etc. Um, and then one day, but I was looking for something better. I was always looking for something better and deeper. And in those days, not many people did anything else in the UK apart from standard hypnotherapy. But one day, a young fella came into my consulting rooms with a severe anxiety state, and he was in a terrible state. He was shaking and he had panic attacks all the time. He was hyperventilating. As he was talking to me, he was stuttering and stammering his words. He was a total bag of nerves. And I asked him how long he'd been like this for. And he said, well, I've always been anxious, even as a child. But over the last few years, it's got worse and worse. And since the children came along, it's just got terrible. I'm panicking all the time. I've had to give my job up. I can't work anymore. I sit at home shaking all day long. My doctors give me medication, which hasn't worked. In fact, it's made it worse. And as we know, that is so often the case with anti-anxiety medication, antidepressants. So often makes these things worse. My wife is just sick of it. She said she'll divorce me if I don't get better. So there was really very little in his life of any major trauma that could have caused such deep anxieties. And I always say, the bigger the problem, the bigger the cause. So this was severe anxiety. This is not caused by mommy losing you in the store for half an hour when you were four. I mean, that's bad enough, but this is big stuff. So the bigger the problem, the bigger the cause. The beautiful thing is the bigger the healing, of course. But I guided him into trance, and I was just going to do my standard post-hypnotic suggestion stuff. I'm sitting there with my script, guiding him in, giving him post-hypnotic suggestions about relaxing, about feeling better, etc., etc. And he relaxed beautifully. He went into a really lovely deep trance. His breathing was slow. His whole body was soft in the chair. And I thought, this is great. I'm on a winner here. And then suddenly, after about 10 minutes, he suddenly became massively tense. He started to hyperventilate and breathe. His body's moving, his head in the chair, he's looking around, and he started to whisper and shout at the same time. Hide, quickly, hide, the children, hide, they're coming, hide them. Shh, quickly, quickly, hide, 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 shh. And then he went quiet, and all of a sudden, he started to shake and writhe and scream and yell, no, 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 not the children, no, no, no. Ah! And he just flopped down in the chair, completely prone. I was shocked, as you can imagine. And I said, how do you feel? He said, I feel wonderful. I said, I feel absolutely wonderful. So what was happening? He said it was weird. It was like I was in another body, in another time. There were soldiers, Nazis, coming to look for me and my family. We were hiding. They found us. They shot us and killed us all. He said, what was that about? I said, well, obviously, I mean, I knew about past lives, of course, but I hadn't trained or used past life regression. So I said, how do you feel? He said, I have never felt this calm in my life. Do you know, Anna, his anxiety state was released in 15 minutes, completely cured. And it really hit me in the face that there's something significant here that I needed to know about. So I got hold of some scripts and past life stuff from the States, started experimenting with it, started being open to the possibility that regression and past lives was a good way to work, started to do group past life regression workshops. And eventually I created a system of regression, which I use now and teach therapists all around the world, which is a way in which we can diagnose where the roots of the client's problem are, whether it's in this life or in past lives or in their ancestors' lives. And I do cover quite a bit in the new book about ancestral trauma and healing ancestral trauma. And it's a technique now, it's a system that can diagnose very efficiently exactly where we need to go in the therapy process. So there's no guesswork, and it makes the whole thing run much more easily. And it's client-led, of course. The client's subconscious is guiding us as to where we need to go. So it was extraordinary. That young man changed my career. He really did.
It is always stunning when you think you're doing one thing and the client leads you somewhere completely unexpected. And that spontaneous regression into past lives is always it's always that moment when you suddenly think, I don't think it's this life that we're talking about here, when the client, and very often it's people who have no interest or knowledge about past lives as well, and suddenly they are there. Something that you said, which I think brings a question. You said he relaxed really beautifully, and people always ask, can anybody do past life regression? So tell us about the different states of relaxation that different people achieve, and what the different states allow.
Okay, that's a good question. I tend to call, hypnosis is trance. So trance is our jargon word. As hypnotherapists, that's our jargon word. So what does a trance mean? A trance for me is a focused state of relaxed inner awareness. And what this means is that it's a combination of inner focus and relaxation. It isn't pure relaxation. So I have many clients who are deep in trance, but they're not very relaxed. But as a rule, most people relax when we guide them into trance. It's a way of letting the conscious mind soften down a little bit. Now, for me, there are 4 different abilities at hypnosis. Now, what that means is that about 25 to 30% of people are very good at hypnosis. It's a natural ability that they have to go into trance. I call them number ones. They're very good at trance. Number twos are good in trance. So they don't go quite as easily as number ones, but they go really quite easily into trance. Number 3 are average at trance. And this is probably most people. And number 4 are crap at trance. It just doesn't suit them. And that's not many. It tends to be a controlling person, somebody who is a controller. Usually it's a controlling male, I'll be honest. Rather than a female, but generally it's somebody who is a controller, doesn't want to let go or refuses to let go, because we can all go into trance because it's a natural state. Daydreaming is trance, that's natural. Relaxation is trance, is natural. Drifting in and out of sleep is trance. So trance is a natural process, but it's really the people who are very good and good, the number 1s and 2s, who tend to find it easier to get into regression. especially into past lives or our ancestors' lives. And what they tend to experience is a deeper, more of a deep experience, in that they often will see it very clearly, and they'll usually will feel it. And there'll be less conscious questioning as they go through the past life, let's say. So as the client is in a past life in a Wild West town, and they're seeing the horses and carriages come down the street, and they can smell the dung and they can hear the sounds. For generally number ones especially, there's less conscious activity. They're more in it. Whereas a number three can be in a past life, an average person at trance, but they will tend to be questioning it a lot more as they're going through. So I always say to my clients, you'll still be thinking, you'll still be analysing, just let go of that and do your best just to be in the experience as much as you can. So, but unfortunately, some people just can't regress as well. I mean, I really, it's quite frustrating at times. There are a few people who, however you try, they just can't regress. It's just not something they can do. And that's either because they're possibly not very hypnotic, or it may be, in some cases, the subconscious doesn't want them to see or to go back into past life because it could be too unpleasant. There are a lot of people, and I specialize working with these people, who I work what I call non-visually or kinesthetically. Because, and this is one of the unfortunate things that many therapists get wrong, they believe that everybody can visualize. You know, oh, everybody can visualize. Well, let me say this. No, we fucking can't all visualize. I can't visualize to save my life. If you ask me to visualize being on a beach and imagine all the waves and imagine this, that, and the other, I get an orange blob. And so what often happens is many therapists who believe everybody can visualize will take a client back using a visualization technique into a past life, and the client doesn't get there. And so they think, oh, well, I can't help you, or you can't be hypnotized, or some nonsense like that. Whereas actually, if you take the client back kinesthetically, they will go back into the past life and they can feel it, often with emotions and or physical feelings as if they're in the past life, but they may not see it. So we can still be in a past life, even though we can't see it. So any therapist listen to this who give that old nonsense that everybody can visualize because everybody dreams in pictures, it's a different state. Dream state is not trance state.
I think that's really important, because sometimes clients just can't see, and and so they think that it's not working because they can't see anything.
Yeah.
And I think that the expectation is that their experience is going to be like they're in a film.
Yes, exactly.
And it's not always like that.
Not at all. And another aspect is using your intuition. I often say to them, just go with whatever comes. Even if you think you're making it up, just go with it. Because so often their intuition kicks in and they'll say, well, it feels as though I'm outdoors. It feels as though there are other people here. It feels as though I'm a woman. Right, so go with this. And when they go with that intuition, it's so often real. It so often becomes a real regression. And that again is part of the process. So, yeah.
It's, a question I often ask is, what do you sense?
Good word. Absolutely. Yeah.
What do you sense this is? What do you sense? And I think that's really important, because sometimes people can't see. And you were talking about some people can't be regressed. Some people find it difficult to regress into memories of their childhood in this life.
Of course, yeah.
It's they just say, oh, I can't remember, and I think, okay, well, that's not the point.
No.
But when they have that idea, that then it's difficult to get them to relax out of it.
Can block it, yeah. They can block it, yeah. I often just say, let your body remember. The body remembers everything. It's all in the energy field. So if we take a client back and regress them back in whatever method, even if it's a kinesthetic regression, just let your body feel it. And it's amazing how often, if the client can just let go of that analytical left brainness and just let energies come through them, then very often the body will move all by itself. They may be moving or twitching, then the emotions can come through. And in all honesty, that's the most important part generally anyway, because the regression model is that all of our issues come from locked in feelings and emotions from past traumas. All of our issues, whether it's a sexual issue, a lack of confidence, a depression, a skin issue, a physical issue, a cancer, a relationship issue, whatever, all of these issues are caused by locked in feelings and emotions from past trauma. So if we can go back into the emotions, even though we don't know what is happening, we don't need to know. Release the emotion, release the energy, and the client gets better, and the issue just dissolves away. But of course, we are left brain beings, and so we want to know, was I a Native American? Or was I a man? We don't need to know that. If it's interesting if that comes through, yes, that is fascinating. And, there is certainly room for doing regressions which are visual and getting further information sometimes from clients, which can make a lot more sense. As a general rule, though, most of my work as a therapist is, I call it trauma release work. And it's so damned effective.
I think it was a good example, the example of this man who regressed to a life in which he'd had that trauma, in which he'd witnessed the murder of his family and, of course, had been murdered himself. Because he went straight to the incident, and it wasn't necessary to go through the whole life to get there.
Absolutely.
It was that key moment that happened.
Yeah.
Did you have to do anything else? You didn't, and that's unusual, where you have to, because normally after the recalling of an event, there's a need for extra support, but not in that case.
I always use the analogy of a pressure cooker. We all have an emotional pressure cooker, and his pressure cooker was bubbling away, big style. The lid was on it, but all the pressure was causing the panic attacks all the time. Now, in his case, the subconscious let that lid off the pressure cooker, and all the pressure just went out in one go. And then the lid went back on. But that meant that all of the pressure in that pressure cooker had gone in one go. So all there is in his pressure cooker now is space. And that space is healing and well-being and calmness. Generally, I would say that about 60% of past life therapy is going back through death trauma. Probably more than 60%, but at least 60% is releasing death trauma. So we don't have to go all the way through the life usually. As a general rule, as you know, we need to go back through the trauma more than once sometimes. So, we may need to go back through the trauma 2, 3, 4, or 5 times in a session in order to fully release all of that energy out of the pressure cooker. But in his case, his subconscious just blew it out in one big go. There was nothing else to do. I just gave him more post-hypnotic suggestions, brought him out of trance, and he was fully healed.
Do you feel that the going through the death itself is key, because these are instances where the death itself was the trauma rather than the events in the past life?
Yes. I mean, the subconscious knows where we need to go. This is the thing. So the beautiful thing is, once a client's in trance, the subconscious, I believe our subconscious is our higher self, or is totally connected to it. And therefore it has this great wisdom. So if we let it do the work, and again, a lot of therapists are too clever or get in the way sometimes, get out the way, let the subconscious do the work. Occasionally, yes, you need to move it on a little bit, but it knows where we need to go. Sometimes we'll go in regression earlier on in the life, and it will move through some background information. But if there's really not much emotion or not much energy there, then I just keep saying, go to the next significant part of the life. And I can even ask the subconscious, as I use the idiomotor response, and it gives me yes, no answers. Is it death trauma we need to explore? And if it says yes, then we'll go there. And usually there's not much else needed. Once you've released that energy, yes, we can do some more work with hypnotic suggestions. We can take them into spirit and allow them to experience being in spirit after death and the wonderful peace of that. But generally, there's not very much needed. There's not very much else needed. Once that energy is released, yeah, it can be shocking. And clients often cry. We'll see lots of tears. But nobody dies from crying. Virginia Satir always said, nobody dies from crying. So let the tears come. And it's just such deep, effective therapy. I mean, it's extraordinary. I still say it's the deepest form of therapy that I know.
I would agree with that. Absolutely. Now, you talked about group regression. So, how are you doing that? Because it's easy for people to conceive, past life work on a one-to-one, but what is happening in a group regression?
Okay. First of all, it's not therapy. So I always emphasize that. This is not a therapy. I don't like therapy groups in that way. And this can be, big stuff. So we don't want people going into heavy stuff. So the first thing is, people come, I give them a talk about, a bit about past life regression and what's going to happen. Then everybody lays down together in the room. Everybody brings blankets or what have you, or four-poster beds or whatever they want to lay on. And I guide everybody into a gentle trance. And then I do use a visualization, actually, because, most people can visualize, where I'm asking them to go back to different time zones. And then they choose, and they just let something come as they're back in the time zone, wherever it is in the past. Just go with whatever comes into your head. Just note it, and then we keep moving. And then they'll choose one of the time zones, and then they're not verbalizing it. Obviously, everybody's quiet and relaxed. And then I just guide them through one of the lives that they want to work in, or that the subconscious chooses. And we'll go through and see where they live, see this, see a significant event, and then etc. And then we go through the death. And then everybody sits around at the end and shares what they had, what their experience is or was, which is fascinating. And we get different, some people get a little bit, some people get quite a lot, some people have amazing experiences. And sometimes they'll get some what can we say, knowledge or some insights, which will give them some insights about the life now. That will occasionally happen. But really, the whole point is of interest. It's an interest. It's a fun sort of afternoon. And I ran them for many years in the UK. Now I've got one soon in West Palm Beach here in Florida, and then a couple in California in November. So it's a lovely way for people to get into past lives without any of the horrible stuff that we're usually doing on a one-to-one basis. So it's a fun afternoon, really, and people really do enjoy it.
Fantastic. Now, you also mentioned working with in regression or in hypnosis on ancestral trauma. So tell us about that.
Okay. The only part of regression therapy, because the three areas, this life, past lives, our ancestors' lives, the only part which is actually scientifically proven is ancestral regression. And they've actually done work with mice and rats, I think some other animals, to prove that at least 4 generations back, trauma can be passed down. From a human perspective, if a person is traumatized, if they don't release that trauma in their life, they can pass the energy of that trauma down to subsequent generations. So it's like in the genes. Generally, it's in the genes. It's like a genetic DNA thing, generally. Although I have done quite a bit of ancestral work and found that it isn't always necessarily in the genes. It can be just like an energy that gets passed down. So, and we do the same in regression. It's just a process of going back into an ancestor's life, reliving their traumas, releasing the energies or the emotions, and then the client gets better. There is, of course, always the shamanic concept that our ancestors are always around with us. So there is a belief, which we can't prove either way, but a belief that if we're working on ourselves for an ancestor, that ancestor is also healing wherever he or she is in the universe. Now, that's a beautiful idea, and people can buy into that or not. Personally, I tend to say, well, it doesn't matter. If it may be real, then I think it's worth honoring our ancestors as part of the healing process as well.
It is an interesting concept, and I would imagine that although souls not in this dimension are not suffering, what it could well do is help unravel the trauma, or let's put it a different way. And we know that time in other dimensions is not linear, but it is here. So we have to use linear to get our heads around things. So let's think for a moment about ourselves. We are here in this lifetime. We're working through certain things, and there are past traumas which we are carrying, and perhaps also we've been affected by the energy of our ancestors, whatever. We die, and some things we've learned and worked on and all is tickety-boo, but then there's other stuff from other lives or whatever that haven't. So here I am in the in-between, between lives, and I'm about to come in to do some work on something. But one of my descendants has now unraveled that. That could mean that as I'm preparing to come in again, and our souls are linked because we are one, that's one thing off my list of things to work on.
Yeah. It may well be that we are making our ancestors' future lives easier. So yeah, it could well be the case. And as you say, time isn't linear, although the subconscious tends to treat it as if it's linear. But yeah, absolutely the case. And often, for some clients, there's a combination of stuff. I mean, one of the cases I write about in the book is a client who came to me with trichotillomania, and teeth grinding and severe anxiety. Now, trichotillomania is hair pulling, and generally just pulling out the hairs in the head. Hers was a bit different. Hers was pulling out her eyelashes, and a subconscious indicated that it was a combination of this life trauma, past life trauma, and ancestral trauma. So we did work in this lifetime to release and heal her inner child. She went into, one past life comes to mind where she was a factory owner in Victorian England. She'd inherited the factory from, he was a man, she was a man in the past life, from her father, took over the factory, ploughed money into it and invested a lot heavily into it, but business got worse and worse and worse. And the stress of that, and all the men and all the people in the factory were being employed, seeing business getting worse, having to lay people off, and eventually the business went bust. The stress of that actually kills this man early on. He has a heart attack because of all the stress. So that was a past life that was connected to causing the trichotillomania. Remember, trichotillomania, it tends to be a self-punishment thing very often. But then she went into an ancestor's life, and she went back, I think it was a great-great-grandfather's life, who was working on the trawlers in the North Sea. Now, that's a hell of a tough job, catching fish in horrendous weather. But he was a tough man. Again, this was, she relived it as though she was him. He was a tough man, but there was a camaraderie of all the crew. But then one day, a young lad, a young teenage boy who was working on the ship in heavy seas, was swept overboard and lost. And the guilt that he felt, because he was the captain, I should have done more, I could have, the guilt was enormous. So we released that. Another ancestor's life, which also was in the ships, he was like a senior engineer on board, building a massive sort of ironclad ship. I don't know, it might even be in the Titanic, it was that type of thing. But there was a problem with the engines just before the maiden voyage, and he had to sort this out. So she's there reliving his stress and his worry. And there was a time, he had to get this sorted. And he was so stressed up, but he managed to get the engines working and it all went smoothly. And there was a big sigh of relief. But all of that tension, all of that anxiety was inside her from her ancestors. So we released that. And over sessions, I can't remember how many sessions we did. We did quite a few. The anxieties got less and less and less. The teeth grinding dissolved away. And finally, she'd forgotten all about pulling her eyelashes out. And so that's a standard regression process. It really is.
Yeah, I've had a number of clients with the hair pulling, and as you say, it very often is a kind of self-punishment that goes on. Um,
Mm.
there is something different in your book. In fact, you open your book with this, and it is about using hypnosis to avoid anesthetics in surgery.
Mm.
And the closest I come to this is helping women who are pregnant with labor to have a nice labor as opposed to a painful one. Um, how did you, how have you done a lot of this, or was that a one-off?
Actually, just before I tell you this, talking about using hypnosis for childbirth, it's so fantastically effective that, in my opinion, it is obscene. And that's the word I use. It's obscene that hypnosis is not used in every single birthing room, every single birthing hospital in the world. Women are giving birth suffering needlessly when they could give birth much quicker, usually with much less use for gas and air, very often no anesthesia. It's better for baby, it's better for mummy, everybody recovers faster. And of course, it's not used more widely because A, most hospitals are run by men, and B, Big Pharma is just interested in making bucketfuls of money. So, hypnotic pain management can be so effective.
It
And
is.
so this is one of the forgotten things about hypnosis.
It is. And I had a client years ago who they were threatening to induce the baby. She didn't want to have the baby induced, but it was because they were concerned that the baby was not growing. And the work we did, almost immediately the baby started to grow.
Mm-hmm.
And it felt absolutely miraculous, but
Yeah.
they didn't need to induce the baby.
No, 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 no.
And that was quite extraordinary. So as you say, the subconscious is a very powerful thing. So yes, there you are, and suddenly you find yourself volunteering
Yeah, yeah.
to be there
Well,
at surgery.
this is a client who came. She had a severe liver disease called focal nodular hyperplasia, which is very rare. And there's only about 12 people in the UK at any one time have this, and hardly anybody survives it. And it's where tumours grow on the liver. And they're not cancerous tumours, but they grow to the size of grapefruits. And so, of course, they push all the internal organs all over the place. So there's constant pain. The liver stops working. There's pain in the liver, and so the client it becomes more toxic. And this poor lady, I mean, she was doped up to the eyeball on morphine. She could hardly eat. She spent all day just laying on the sofa, just feeling ill and in pain. And she came to see me. She had to be helped up the stairs to my office in those days by two people, and she looked like a sticking insect. She was in her mid-30s, and she sat in front of me. She said, "You're my only hope. I've been given 6 months to live. My specialist can't help me. He doesn't know what to do anymore. He said, go away and write your will." So I started to share with her about the emotional causes of illness. Every single physical illness has emotional causes. And of course, the liver is the seat of anger. So there would be a lot of anger inside her, which meant there's a lot of sadness inside her. And so she was understanding of that. I guided her into trance. She relaxed beautifully. And I just did some standard work, giving some post-hypnotic suggestions to feel less pain, to feel more at ease. She came out of trance and the pain had dropped from 10 out of 10 to 4 out of 10. And she could walk on her own. She came back a week later and she'd stopped taking the morphine. She started to get a life back. She said, I don't need it. And I taught herself hypnosis so she could do her own work as well. We began a process of healing the emotional traumas this life. There were 2 past lives which were causing the liver disease. In one of the past lives, she'd been stabbed in the back as a Native American woman in a raiding party. Of course, guess where the dagger went? Straight through the liver. And in the second past life, she was a young Polish teenage boy who was bayoneted to death by the Nazis in World War II. Again, in the same area. So her body had brought in trauma in that liver area into her energy field now. So we did a lot of work on that, and she got stronger and stronger. The tumors stopped growing. They actually stopped growing. And her surgeon was so pleased that she came into my office one morning and she said, I saw my specialist at the hospital, the consultant, last week, and he wants to do the surgery again with me. Now, previously, they tried this twice before, and it was a complete disaster because she had to drink a dye down so that he could see what was happening in her body while he was doing this delicate work in the operating theatre. And she's very allergic to most things. So she spent the whole operation retching and vomiting while he's trying to do delicate work. The first time he damaged the liver itself. The second time he damaged the gallbladder so badly, she had to have a gallbladder removed. And both times she was in hospital for, I think, 10 days afterwards. So she sat in front of me and she said, he wants to do the operation again. He knows I'm strong enough to do it. And these words came out of my mouth: we'll do the operation in hypnosis. And then I looked around, I thought, who said that? Who the hell said that? And she said, really? And then it was one of the, I call it the oh shit moment. You go, oh shit, what have I done here? She said, I'll have a word with him. And of course, oh yeah, absolutely, we'll do it in trance. Thinking, well, I've never done hypnosurgery, and this was the early 1990s. Nobody trained any hypnotherapist in hypnosurgery. But she was very good in trance. She was a number 1, which was a big bonus. And the surgeon agreed. He said, yeah, he was desperate, I think, because he'd had such a bad time the previous surgeries. So we started rehearsing. We did a lot of rehearsals to release the pain, to anaesthetize the body. And so on the day of the surgery, I stayed in the operating theatre all the way through the experience, anaesthetized the body, disassociated her. So she moved up 13 floors out of the hospital, and I took her on a journey around the stars. The whole thing was a massive success. It only took 90 minutes. There was no defensive reflexes. At the end of the surgery, I mean, I write about it very, very funnily in the book because it was a funny experience for me because it was damned weird because of everything that was going on, because I have a problem with blood. So it really caused me problems. But at the end of the surgery, the surgeon said, I've never seen anything like this in my career. He said, it was like operating on a dead body. Give me one of your cards. We'll have to talk about this. Well, I'm waiting for that telephone call 29 years later. But that lady is now 29 years past her die-by date. So, these things are possible. The mind is so powerful. And it's just ridiculous how people forget how powerful the mind is and stick with conventional treatments.
One statement that you make in the book about the power of the mind, which might make some people raise their eyebrows. Your subconscious already knows what is going to happen to us in advance of it happening. So you are now telling us that we have precognition.
Mm-hmm. In some cases, it appears that the subconscious already knows. And I give a story in the book about Milton Erickson, the father of modern day hypnosis, who was doing a demonstration of hypnosis. And this lady wrote something down on a piece of paper and then called him 6 months later. She found this piece of paper in a handbag when after the trance session, and it had actually subconscious had told her without her knowing who she was going to marry, the man she'd only met once, and she was in a different relationship, engaged to somebody else. So Yeah, the subconscious has these. I know. How is that the case for every single person? It must be, but I think some people are more fine-tuned than others and more able to use the subconscious in that way to tune into the future.
And I think the thing is that it's that inner knowing, isn't it? This is a form of precognition that is based upon the fact that there's what our left brain is planning to do.
Mm.
And then when you connect with what's going on in the heart is saying, in this case, wrong man, right man. And
Yeah.
so, and that is, it makes complete sense that this would be the case because we can sense if we are, the more in tune we are with ourselves and how we feel, the more we allow that intuition to guide us.
Mhm.
And then the less likely we are to get into situations that we regret later on because they are out of line with who we truly are and what we truly feel.
Mhm.
So, the book that we have been discussing is called The Adventures of a Hypnotherapist, and it is absolutely wonderful. And I think the reason that I practice as a hypnotherapist is because of the joy of watching people be at peace with themselves, be free from pain, be better equipped to deal with the with life and life's challenges. And that is the most wonderful and rewarding thing that I could think of doing. And the joy that you feel is very apparent when you speak and in your book.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, very much so. It's been said that if hypnotherapy could be bottled, it would be mankind's wonder drug. And that, I think, says it all.
It certainly does. So, Steve, thank you very much for your time today.
Well, my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Anna, and thanks for such an intelligent conversation. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. And now, if you want to find Steve's book, the link is in the description box, as will his website be, and any other links that he cares to provide will also be in that description box, along with links to my own websites as well as my Substack. If you are, as we spoke about astrology at the beginning of the program, if you are interested in learning astrologer, a new course for beginners is starting in October. Do get in touch. Next time, we're going to go from past lives to the pre birth experience. Until then, goodbye.